Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it. Welcome, Maria Rios. We're so glad to have you to be part of our podcast. I'd like to share with some of our viewers our in-house multicultural strategist and the value it brings to a business.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to sharing whatever details are needed.
Great. So let people know how you first got involved in multicultural.
Well, I joined a department store in Houston, actually, is where I started my career, and I started out in creative. I was a bilingual copywriter, and I started going to some content meetings, as we called them. And, there was some overarching comments being made about the Latino consumer, and it just made me curious about how we were putting together advertising for them and what we were putting out there for them. So I started speaking up, and then a position opened up in multicultural marketing. The department was created, and I applied and I got the job. So that's literally how I went from being in creative to marketing. And then that department store was then bought out by Macy's. And I followed the Macy's road all the way to New York, where I was director of multicultural marketing for 5 years. Then I was recruited to Philadelphia by Comcast, where I worked on their Xfinity stores. And currently I am working with you at Baker Creative.
All right. We hear a lot of potential businesses often say that they think that the Black Lives Matter movement is gone and multicultural is just a trend. What were your thoughts on that?
So I definitely want to clarify that the movement that we saw last summer has not faded at all. It is 100% alive, and it is definitely something that companies should take an interest in, not just for their business purposes, but for their employees. Their wellness is at stake because of it. And also for their consumers. If their clients and retaining their clients matters at all to them, they need to know what's going on with that movement overall. Not only did it raise flags for one specific community, but the rest of the communities banded together and elevated their concerns about their race or their ethnicity or culture, and how they bring themselves to work, how they are treated in certain businesses. And it's definitely worth staying abreast of what's going on in that area. So it is by far not over. It is definitely still very much a part of the conversation. And you can see it by the way some companies reacted in hiring diversity, equity, and inclusion positions. A lot of big name companies have done that. And then also in a lot of the marketing that has gone out, there's a lot more inclusion that you will see. A lot of them are leading with multicultural insights. The other reason that I think it's very important is, the 2020 census is giving us some important information here that multiculturalism is growing in the United States. And as such, the different segments that we talk about when we talk about multicultural, which in my world is Hispanic, African American, Asian American, and Asian Pacific Islander American, and then also LGBTQ community. You want to make sure that they're a part of your business plan, but also make sure that the customer can see themselves reflected in what you're putting out to attract them to your brand. It's not easy to do. There's a lot of miscues and missteps that you can have, but that's where, having a solid multicultural insights and strategy put together, it will help you, stay the course. You need one for, definitely for each segment, which is, more work, but it's definitely important for you to take this into account. And no product and no service is, exempt in my book. I'm sure it can be argued, but I think you'd be surprised at, how multiculturalism is important in a lot of aspects of, life in general.
So can you kind of tell me, how does strategic marketing plans and engaging content help multicultural activities succeed?
Number one, we all have our ideal customer, and we need to identify that customer within these subsegments. The other reason that you want this strategy, or that you want to identify the subsegment, is because all of the ethnicities are not monolithic. It can be said, there's different sociodemographic considerations, there's different areas of the country that they're in, and each area has its own culture. There's a prevalent nationality, particularly in the Hispanic community, now in the African American community as well, or the Black community as it's growing with immigration, from Africa, from the islands, and the Black community in the United States itself. So there's definitely a lot to consider, and that also changes your message. So the importance of your strategic plan is to identify who you want to target, because they should be a part of your, ideal customer, your target customer. But then also your messaging has to match the different cultural nuances to make sure you're reaching the audience in the tone and the vernacular, or that you want to reach them in. You don't want, again, to take a misstep and use certain words that could be triggers for something else. The other thing is for imagery. You want to be inclusive, especially when you think about it from a total company or a total brand awareness campaign. You definitely want to be inclusive, so that you're able to show on the front end that you serve everyone, that you aren't, exclusive to one segment. These strategic plans, they require a lot of thought. You definitely need to have insights, because in the end, it's going to inform your messaging, it's going to inform your creative, and ultimately it'll determine your key performance indicators to understand its success. So 100% must have a strategic plan.
Absolutely. And I think at Baker Creative, you and I both agree that if you speak the right messages in the language of the core customer and really reach them where they're at, that really makes the difference.
Absolutely. And I think the important thing you said here as well is, where are they at? Each community has has an affinity for different platforms, or different channels, if you will. And if you're not there, they might not see you. So it's important to have a good read on that, to then be able to deliver the right message to the right person at the right place.
Absolutely. And when we've done different campaigns, whether it's African American or Hispanic or Nepali, understanding how that different culture even engages within its own group, and how they communicate with each other, and how they accept what's true and what's not true, and understanding the influencers within that micro group is very important.
Absolutely, because not every influencer that we see, when we zoom out, that we think, oh, because they're African American, they must be well liked in their own community, or because they're Hispanic, they must be, the poster child for something. No, definitely some research has to go into it. And then also, do they fit your brand? You also have to have a fit of values and the initiatives that they're a part of, to make sure that you have the right person representing and being an ambassador for you.
So being a Latina, how has that made a difference in the services that you offer?
In my career, I think it has brought credibility and trust. It has built trust, certainly with the clients that I have dealt in my corporate life. Hispanic marketing was at the top of the list of the segments when it came to multicultural marketing. And there was a need for someone to be in culture, as I like to say, to be able to speak to the nuances. And certainly I did not pretend to be focus group of one. I knew that I was one person, but I also knew that I needed to consult with others. So in corporate life, I relied I relied on our employee resource groups. So whenever there was something where I needed some feedback, I would go to them and I was like, hi, how is this resonating with you? Are we off the mark? Do we think we're going to hit some bumps along the way, or how's it going? And it proved to be really helpful because you typically have a cross segment of people in those groups. For a smaller business, it's certainly helpful, to have the backing of, an agency like Baker Creative, where you're stepping out of your own business and your own lens to get a viewpoint from someone else. I think that that's where being of the culture and as Hispanic marketing took off, and it's currently in it, as it is now with the population growing so much. It's important to understand those nuances, and only, I'm not going to say only being of the culture is helpful, but it is certainly a plus. So that's one aspect. Also, certainly being bilingual is very helpful. I was able, to identify ways to contribute and bring value to the work that I did in creative as much as in the strategic side of things, because creative ultimately is what the consumer sees. And so to be able to give input on that was important, and to be able to do it in Spanish was very important. From the other side of it, I also, it gave me access to organizations and associations that continue to be a sounding board for me in as far as, developing strategic plans that are successful or that hit the mark rather than miss the boat. So,
okay, what is the business advantages of embracing multiculturalism?
well, you'll be targeting a larger segment than if you just focus on one, on just doing one ad and one ad alone. You never know what other consumers might arise. You never know what other revenue streams might arise for you. There might be a need that you can serve in that community that you're not typically offering because you didn't know that it was a need somewhere else. There's definitely plenty of advantages. You're also expanding your reach a lot further. Because you're looking to reach a target market beyond, let's say, your immediate 10-mile radius, or you're looking to reach Hispanic consumers. They might not be within your 10-mile radius. Then you're expanding your reach completely, and your footprint is getting bigger. So that's one key thing. You're also building a larger client base or customer base. Sure, you can hit them with the one ad you've been doing for the past 5 years, but that's not a way to do it anymore. As the internet and social media has proven to us, we have to be fast on our feet, and we have to think quickly about how to attract them because their attention span is getting shorter. And again, multiculturalism gives us new ideas and a new customer base to think about. So I think expansion and expanding your reach are the two big advantages of considering this as part of your overall strategy.
Have you ever heard any, I don't know if this is the case for you, but have you heard any rumblings from the multicultural community when big brands really just kind of give out generic campaign and marketing and communication approach to their core base?
The community as a whole is very vocal, and they can certainly call out a brand when they're not being inclusive, when they're not doing anything more. But I think the brand itself feels it more than anyone because the dollars aren't being spent there by the community. And multicultural consumers tend to support or show support with their dollars. So if you're not there for them, they're not going to be there for you. And it can be argued 20 different ways. Well, I really don't need to do this. I don't need to do a separate ad for African-American consumers because they speak English. Right. But if you're not, focusing on the things that are important to them, then you might be missing an opportunity to grow your business with them. And that's what's important. You want to retain those customers as well as grow your business. You can only acquire the number of new customers you can acquire is finite, but growing your business and retaining your consumers is what's going to keep your business growing. I think that if you're not considering multicultural consumers as part of your overall strategy, then even giving them consideration, even deciding, do I need to do this, and taking, doing the homework, doing the assessment, and then deciding I can do this to make sure that I'm getting, I'm reaching these communities, then that's part of the job, right? I think that staying generic and not giving it a thought is definitely going to keep you behind the times.
When it's a missed opportunity.
A huge missed opportunity.
And I think it could be a differentiator as well. So we have at Baker Creative different advisory boards that we can bounce things off of if we did multicultural campaigns and messaging. And that way we can get a full breadth of, a really snapshot of how people are taking it. And I think it's important to have that and offer that for all kinds of different sizes of businesses, because not everybody has that opportunity. And reaching out to the right audiences to do testing and beta testing on certain concepts really is important, especially when you're talking about different cultures.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. All for testing. It helps you learn so much more along the way. And if you can do it small before you go out with your big message, it is certainly helpful to get the right message out there.
Yeah, no one wants to have the Nova campaign all over again.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
not so good.
Yes.
Yes. So that aside, you've being at Macy's and talking to all kinds of different size businesses in the past, what do you think the biggest mistake you see a lot of medium, small size businesses making
when it comes to the multicultural consumer?
Yes.
I'll name two that I've seen recently. It is leading with your own preconceived thoughts about a community, rather than taking the extra step and asking an expert or asking for help. It's, I know this is what it's going to be. Even I, as a member of, the Latino community, know that my nationality, which I'm Mexican, is not the end all be all in the United States. That what I say should be, or what I think is, emblematic of my community, is not the same as the community in New York or the community in Miami. So, I take stock and I go to my fellow experts in those markets. So that's one big mistake. Don't just assume that because you've read enough articles or because you've done all the research on the internet and everything. Always talk to somebody, talk to an expert. And of course, we're available here at Baker Creative to do that, so that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. And then the second piece of it is not putting enough thought and imagination, that you are leaving a Spanish translation secondhand, that you do the English version first, and then from a creative perspective, and talking about radio and TV in particular, you do the English version first, and then you think because you've translated it for the Spanish language radio and TV stations that you can cross off your Hispanic marketing plan. That's not the case. There's a lot of things, a lot of nuances that come into play. And if you take the extra thought and make something that is developed with insights, then going that extra step means so much more to the community. You're more likely to get a longer lifetime value consumer out of it for your brand, rather than, oh, that's that law firm, or that's that, that service that they're providing. No, you want them to say, wow, they really took time to think about me and this community here. Let me go hear more about them, or let me get their services, or let me go shop there.
And I think people feel more comfortable in a place they feel welcome, and that they see themselves in. And whether you work there, whether you shop there, or whether you see the commercial, I think that's really important for people to make that visual connection as well.
Definitely. And you can always tie it back to your values, your company values, and your mission and your vision. the growth of your company depends on it. So taking that extra step to do this will just take you further.
Understood. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.